the thing about religion is that it's basically unprovable. Of course, you get people claiming that it is provable, and it's a somewhat important function of we philosophers to explain why this just isn't so.
The power of our democracy.
To have a democracy that maintains itself, you need, in the first place, the right to vote. Now, interestingly enough, the right to vote is not subject to the vote. That is to say, if 51% of the people vote to deprive Smith of his vote, that'll be invalid. I mean, everybody will realize that you can't do that. What that realization requires and amounts to is a very interesting question. The right to vote is clearly a basic one, but you have to vote for somebody, and the question is who? Well, here again, everybody has to have the right to run for office. Now, that's a strong statement, and of course, in our large-scale democracies, even Canada, after all, with its 40 million people, well, that's quite a few. And there aren't all that many offices available. And a lot of people will think, well, there's no point in my even trying to run for office because I just won't be popular enough. Well, whatever might be the case with that, you still have the right to do it if you want to. You can try. You have the right to try. And as it were, nobody can stop you. That's a very important right. Now then, we also need elections that occur fairly often. Now, how long is long enough? Well, in most countries, it runs to maybe 4 or 5 years for what you might call the lower house, the one that really does the business. Now, you can run for that kind of office anytime, and you won't be elected. You won't even be able to run, not on one of the major parties anyway. But of course, you can run as an independent, and anybody can do that. It probably won't work, but he has the right to try. Again, what's really important is that the people who run for office cannot be the people whom the previous or the present government says will run for office. Right? Now, I mean, if you have a government in office right now, and it passes a law that nobody can run for office except people that we approve of, well, democracy is beginning to go down the drain there. I mean, even if you have everybody voting, if they can't vote for the people they want, then what the heck good is it, right? So we need that. Now, we also need, I think, freedom of what I will call political speech. Now, that's an important distinction there between political speech and everything else. Political speech has to be guaranteed as a right in order to enable this right to run for office and the right to vote to mean what they're supposed to mean, to have the kind of effect that they really are supposed to have. So that's our next provision, that there be freedom of at least political speech. And of course, in addition, clearly the opposition is not allowed to machine gun your candidate or something like that. Of course, that's a right that everybody has anyway, which we'll talk about in a moment. But my point is, in the case of people running for office and so on, they have to be protected by the other kind of rights. So let's turn to those. I call those human rights, just because the idea is that every human, by virtue of being human, is to have these rights. Now, consider a sort of list of human rights, and this is partial. Freedom of movement, that's specific in Canada's, the appendix to the Canadian Constitution. And of course, it's very important. I mean, nobody should be able to say, you cannot go to Alberta, or you cannot visit Kazakhstan. Well, maybe the Kazakhstanese won't let you in, but Canada should be letting you out if you want to go. Freedom of lifestyle. Well, that's extremely important. Of course, the current popular candidates are sexual, so there's homosexuals and there's trans and various, I don't even know all the categories anymore, but it is a function of the liberal constitution, as we might call it, that those people be allowed to live that way if that's the way they want to live. And then there's freedom of religion, which is historically, easily, I think, the most important of these kinds of rights. Religion has probably caused more wars than anything else down through history. And there's a reason for that. The thing about religion is that it's basically unprovable. Of course, you get people claiming that it is provable, and it's a somewhat important function of we philosophers to explain why this just isn't so. I myself was once such a person. There was some local student organization hired this guy to come up and give a talk, at which he claimed that I forget, it was he made a reference to some kind of theorem in physics as showing that you can prove the existence of God.
Okay.
And I went, oh dear. I think that most of the audience listening to this will understand that you don't expect to be able to prove to somebody with a different religion that yours is the right one. I think that's fairly clear. Now, given that that's so, if you are insistent that the other guy is in the wrong, what are your options? The answer is fight. And it's not a good option. To begin with, it's not a good option because it isn't going to work in the sense that you're not going to convert the other person. You're just going to kill him, or he'll kill you, or something like that. But at the end of the day, the question will still be wide open. So religion is, it's a surefire starter of wars, unless we all agree, wait a minute, we're not going to do this. That's, for example, what happened in 1648. It was agreed among the nations that they would not go to war over religion anymore. That was out. And what do you know? It has pretty well worked. Hooray. There have been other things. For example, people have gone to war in order to take possession of the other people's stuff. And of course, of his land, as in the case of Putin right now. I think the case of the Ukrainian war is a wonderful example. It's horrible, but it's wonderful as an example. Putin, pretty obviously, I think to everybody, has absolutely no acceptable reason for starting this war. Notice that even if his specified reason was applicable, I mean, even if the Ukrainians are really Russian, that still doesn't give you the right to kill them, which is what he's doing. So discussion of human rights is an important subject, and you can go on, and they get tricky when you ask, well, is there, for example, the right to education, the right to food, welfare rights in particular? Well, there's question whether those are really part of human rights.